I also think vertically most of the time. So the way music happens to me, and I love saying music happens to me because it's not. Um, I have a couple of friends who do improv, and their approach to it is like I just get out of the way and let the process go. Like I stop being a barrier for it, and I relate to that so much.
Welcome to Song Doctor Sunday. Today will be the last Song Doctor Sunday in quite a while because I'm going to take a few months to move. I'm in Chicago right now and I'm moving to Princeton to start my PhD there in the fall, but I am moving July 1st, so that's going to be quite an adventure. I'll be doing a PhD in music composition there. I'm very excited about it, and I'm looking for a place that I can build my own home recording studio. What's up, Abi? Welcome. Feel free to request join whenever you're ready. Today we've got Abi on. I was connected to him through a mutual friend who's a producer out in LA, and we have not met yet, so this will be fun. This will be a conversation with someone I have not yet had conversations with, and I'm very excited for it. And this July, if anyone is interested on the West Coast, I will be in San Francisco and Los Angeles in the middle of July for 1 week each doing mini intensives for music production and songwriting. So if you are on the West Coast and you're interested in an intensive, definitely DM me, let me know, because I'm going to cap it at about 6 people for each workshop, and we're going to have 4 days of master classes, and it's going to be super fun. So, hey, coming in. What's up, Owen? What's up?
Hey there.
Hi, new friend.
How is it going?
I'm good. Thank you for agreeing to talk with someone you've never met before live on Instagram.
No. I absolutely love what you do, and I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. Are you, by the way, have you lived in Miami? Or I saw your
Yeah.
Miami music. Oh, okay. Are you a New World School of the Arts alum?
No, but actually, a lot of my students are from New World School of the Arts. Are
Okay.
you an
I
alumni?
went there. I went to
Oh,
high school,
wow.
so I know a lot of NWSA people, and they're all over the world now. I mean, so many amazing people come out of that program and do cool stuff. But yeah, I was like, he kind of seems like one of ours. He might be a fighting pigeon.
And you're in New York now, right?
I'm kind of, pandemic kind of like displaced me, but I'm on my way back to Jersey. I was in Chicago during the pandemic because that's where my family is, and working remotely because I was living in New York, and then I was on tour when the pandemic hit.
So, oh no.
I was a touring musician, but that's good. That's long time ago. There was this thing called touring musician, and that was a job people once had. Anyway, but
well, it looks like it's starting to pick up again, isn't it? I mean, I have a couple of
certain
friends.
places, yeah, it's true. It's
Yeah.
interesting to see how things develop. And you know what? It sounds weird to say, but I had a great pandemic.
No, likewise. I mean, it is so tough to talk about it because on one end, like artistically, I really had a fantastic year. Personally, it was really tough.
Right.
Family,
It's that
health.
weird combo, but it almost gives you more juice when personal stuff is so bad that you're just like, I'm just gonna put my energy into work because that's all I know how to do. Otherwise, I'm gonna fall apart. And then your work starts to blossom, and you're like, well, who knows what the fuck is happening, but cool. Oh, you froze for a second. Tours, I remember the word from the before time, the long ago. That's hilarious. Abby, you froze. You might have to come back in. that's not me. Every once in a while, the guests have a freeze attack. He's gonna come back in. But what's up, everybody? This is a weekly series, Song Doctor Sunday, where I talk to music producers and songwriters and artists and directors and creatives. And honestly, it's just off the cuff because all I ever talk about all the time anyway is that. So here we go. I'll be coming back in. Yay.
Here I am. Okay.
It's all right.
No worries. My Wi-Fi has been on and off for the whole week, and I apologize for that.
That's okay. That's all good.
No, but you were saying something really awesome that I really empathize with, which is like how the personal is always like serving as juice for the creative, right?
Juice, such a good word.
And how's the process for you? I mean, I'm fascinated by your music. Let me start by saying that. And I'm so curious about your own creative process. How was it for you?
It's honestly, this is something I spend most of my time thinking about because like I'm either in it or I'm thinking about what it is and like contemplating it. I'm a very contemplative person. It's like kind of my nature. And I think that's part of why the pandemic, if someone's like, hey, Hope, go in your room and don't come out for a year, I'm like, okay. Like it's not that hard for me to do natural. Just my nature is kind of like I could be a monk very easily. That would be totally fine. But I guess having said that, like it's a lot of what I think about is that process. And I think because I teach too, over the pandemic I started teaching music production to help people get their studios up and running and like learn how to produce their own music. And so as I've been teaching, I've been thinking about, well, what am I actually doing? Like once you have to explain it to someone else, you really have to think about it differently. Mm-hmm. And my honest conclusion is that it's chaos. Like, I keep trying to come to like, oh, here's the equation. But every time I find an equation, there's a part of my brain that's like, that's kind of bullshit though, because here are all these examples of where that's not true. So I guess the word I keep coming to is that it's an excavation. And for me, I know for everyone it's different what they're trying to search for. But for me, I always want to know what's the truth. And, depending on what I'm going through, it's going to be different. But like in my work, I'm always like, but what's the truth? What's the truth? And so it's kind of like this layered like thing where every time I pull a new layer off and then I'm like, okay, but is that true? Or like, is there something underneath that? And what's that thing underneath that? So in some ways it makes it extremely difficult to present. I don't know. I think social media is actually in a moment of switching to where you don't have to so much explain to people exactly what you do. You can just constantly show what you do and people can make their own decisions. Yeah. I think that's happening now, but that wasn't so much the case even like a year ago, where it was much more like, oh, we're going to hire you, but tell us exactly in your bio exactly what you do. And that's always a really challenging question for me, because I'm like, well, I mean, how much do you know about music? Because that changes my answer to you. And also it like depends on the day and my mood. And like, I just don't, actually in this series, I've talked with a lot of people about this idea about, I don't know if this is a fair way to put it, but kind of like more masculine ways of thinking about it, more feminine ways of thinking about it. Not so much gendered of like how men make work and how women make work, but more like, is it like a decisive, active, like, here's what we got to do, boom, 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 boom? Or is it more like in the flow, free form, we don't quite know yet. A group of us are getting together and we're just going to bounce ideas off of each other. And we don't know what we're making yet, but we're going forward with it anyway. And the kind of these combinations, and both are needed. But the process of like getting through something kind of requires growth. And so I think like the nature of the questions often of like, well, what kind of music do you make? And what, it's almost like I almost feel like it's like the wrong question. But
yeah, I mean,
I tend to live in like the loopy place. So
No, no, no.
That was like
I
a
absolutely
non-answer to your question.
no. But I absolutely love it. I absolutely love your approach, and I'm so curious to know more about. I mean, you chose the word excavation, and I relate to it so much. But I'm wondering, what does that mean for you specifically?
I think that like my love affair with making art and with making music is getting to know like first of all the world that I live in more. It kind of forces me to look more deeply at things. Like if I'm going to take the time to curate something, I always think of it kind of like this the pressure that makes a crystal or the pressure that makes a stone. When you're working with a
Mm,
lot of material to make a piece of art, you're taking all of this information from everywhere and then you're kind of like making into this jewel that you can like hand off to someone else. And so it takes a lot of like I always tell my students like expect to throw away 90% of your work just off the bat. Don't feel bad about it. That's everybody. Like just get that out of the way. And I think about that too when like pre-research phase for making work. So part of it is that process of I'm going to go look at something in the world a lot more deeply than I would have to otherwise.
mm,
And I'm going to learn more about this wild, divine place that I live in. Additionally, I'm going to learn more about who I am inside of it and what does that
mm,
mean for me. So it's kind of like what gear or what part inside of the watch turning or whatever, what part am I inside of that larger thing? So it's like kind of a two-pronged approach. But for me, that's what's fascinating is
mm.
like even if and I wonder if part of this is like if you make enough work that no one really listens to you're kind of like okay well what's in it for me like let's say that no one ever
Mm,
or I only ever get 1,000 streams on this album that took me 2 years to make or something
mm,
like what does that 2 years of my life mean for me and that's the conclusion I've come to that feels like yeah I can keep doing this no matter what no matter who's watching no matter who's listening. I mean ultimately I like to be part of conversations that's why I make
mm.
things but it's kind of like in the event that no one shows up to my birthday party I'm still having a good time.
This is that is great. You know, like a lot of what I do, and I don't know if you noticed, but I don't have anything on Spotify. And I think that the only thing I'm going to upload on Spotify now, and again, it's gonna be just me jumping in the water, um, is a soundtrack for a film I just recently composed. And I guess I'm gonna start just uploading my music. But for now, it's been such an intimate process. And again, a lot of my music is public for a variety of reasons. So it goes to theater, it goes to
Right.
films or theme entertainment and stuff. So it is public. It's just that I don't have any of it yet on any streaming platforms. Um, Not for anything negative. It's more like it's been such an intimate process that I'm almost like going at it as if every piece of music that I create is almost as if I'm writing on a diary, you know? So I have like these, um, it's not a philosophy, you know, it's just something that applies to everyone, right? But I'm always considering that nobody's the same person 2 days in a row. Everything
I
you
love
go
that.
through, every single conversation you go through, every new piece of music, everything influences you, and you're
Yeah,
exposed to it on a daily basis. So what I think of it is that
that's such a freeing thought by the way.
I love it because
Yeah.
I mean, in so many different levels beyond, been super helpful to me. Um, Mostly because whatever happened yesterday is someone that I'm not anymore. So it also allows me to kind of see myself from the past with compassion, but also see myself from you know tomorrow with curiosity. You know, it's more like okay, what's happening tomorrow, and how is it that today is going to shape that, and what can I take from it, either um, sorrow or joy, but or anything in between, and how can I translate that into the medium that I feel more comfortable using, which is music in this case. So I absolutely love um, everything you said about excavation and this process, like decluttering things until you have that diamond. I love it. I absolutely love that. And I'm
And it's
also curious.
interesting. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, go for it.
It's interesting that I think that there are a lot of professions that have that in different ways, where it's like there's only so much time in the day. So I think everyone has a different way in which they really like put their heads down and create clarity for other people, like do the deep work to create clarity. And I think as artists, people turn to us for deep emotional clarity, because that's a
Mm.
shit ton of work that like most people don't want to do because it's way too hard. So
Yeah.
like to kind of do all of that, so it's like this part, and then to also kind of like sit with the philosophy of things and be like, okay, but who is this serving, and why are we, it's kind of like this head and heart connection. That's the
Hmm.
deep work. And then obviously you have a skill set, whatever it is, whether it's music or filmmaking or dance or whatever it is. But I feel like the thing that the arts bring is kind of that deep emotional clarity. And
Hmm.
emotion is really why people make decisions with anything. Like we think it's all intellectual, like, oh, we come to intellectual understandings and then we make clear cut decisions. Like, no, you feel something and then you act.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
it's so powerful. I think that's why, advertisements love us. Like, we want to sell this shit, so make them feel something so they buy it. We're like, okay, well, that's what we do. So,
Indeed, indeed. Like based on that, I'm very curious about something because I know you're also in the field of music for storytelling, right?
yeah.
And I love the word storytelling. That's something I sort of adopted at Sundance because it's not only film, right? It's anything narrative.
Yeah.
Um, in your preference, do you like being attached to projects during development or in post-production?
Development.
Mm,
But
why, why?
I'm one of those like hardcore people that's like I want to be there from day one through the whole fucking thing. But that I don't think I like vibe well with probably most of the LA scene, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's true. That's just my very stand backish observation. Is I think there's kind of this like conveyor beltness too, also to pop music, which I love pop music, but I've just kind of I think when you're working in certain realms, there's so much money at hand, and like people really can't take a ton of risks because there's so many people involved that they really need like extreme efficiency. And I
Hmm.
totally understand why you would need that at that level. You're messing with people's money and investments and like all this stuff, and so many people are involved that there's not a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes.
Hmm.
But I think where I thrive, because I grew up making work in the Chicago theater scene, which is where people go to develop work that then gets taken to Broadway or whatever, but they come here because it's cheaper to develop work. So I spent a lot of time in like black box theaters and rehearsal rooms with people like doing these weird 2 hour long exercises where you like walk in certain patterns around the room and notice how different your body feels, and then like make a collective sound together
Yeah.
and see what that energy is. And so it's like very kind of from that space is where I grew and then came into this. And I was drawn to making music for film because I was excited by, first of all, I saw that as the future. I was like, we're all going
Hmm.
to be digital very soon. And that was my observation like 8 years ago. I was like, got like a year until everything is digital. And I really wanted to play around with that collaboration. I was very excited by VR too, about like kind of connecting these worlds. And
And have you explored VR?
a tiny bit. I think that's going to be a next frontier for me, but a bunch of things kind of came in the way in the meantime where I was like, okay, these things first. I started producing for other artists and writing music for other artists and stuff, and that's been really exciting. And so I was like, okay, I'll get to VR, but it's I might more go into it when I have like a team of people
Hmm.
who are already kind of in that field, because it's a lot of tech, and
Yeah.
I might need a team, a techie team to work with on that. But I'm still very excited about. I love like electroacoustic live shit. That's super fun. And
No,
like,
it's
bringing
amazing.
intersections and kind of meshing worlds. That's like very exciting to me. But in the meantime, have been doing other projects and stuff. But I think I got on a tangent. What was your initial question?
No, but I mean, that's amazing, and you're touching upon a couple of topics that I can also talk to. The first one was coming to storytelling processes at the very beginning. So for me, it's kind of a conundrum to me, right? Because like the reason most producers um, bring composers in the end of the process, like towards post production, even if the composer is attached at the beginning, um, it's for financial reasons, right?
Right.
But
Totally.
then,
Yeah.
well, then that creates a scenario in which um, the whole creative process happens in a rushed period of
I
time.
know, it's so stressful.
Yeah, not only it is stressful, which it is significantly, but also it prevents the film from getting a way more mature version of the soundtrack. Like when you have the time to live with it, like the director has been living with this script for how many months, and
I
and
know. And
like
to make
like
mistakes
yourself,
that might surprise
yeah,
you. Like I
indeed,
feel like
indeed,
so many
indeed.
people come totally and they're like, okay, I want this sound, I want basically the soundtrack, but like legally different. And you're like, don't hire
Hmm.
an artist. It's not an artist's job. An artist's job is not basically make this painting, but only different enough to where I don't get sued. Like
Exactly.
that's like a crafts person, sure, go ask, but like don't ask an artist that. Like
Yeah.
that's not what we've spent our entire life. Like it's just
No,
like
no,
a
no.
displacement of abilities or something.
Yeah, and I also come from the theater scene. Like before I ventured into film or anything else, my first thing was theater. So I've composed original music for over 30 plays,
That's
and
awesome.
musicals. Yeah, so and the process in theater is so long and so
Yeah.
beautiful and so meaningful because
So
you're
yeah.
yeah, you're mostly part of the workshop, and there's something that happens when you have an opportunity to see the actors on, in
Yeah,
the
and to like
floor,
fight with
coming up
people.
with things on the spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I don't know if you relate to this, but I think what happens in long processes where you have access to especially the rehearsal part of acting, um, there's somehow similarities to what happens when you're recording with live musicians in a studio, which is that after you come up with the music, after everything is like tied up, then you expose just a piece of paper, and maybe a reference to a musician that is way better at playing their instrument than you are at imagining what the instrument can do. So
Right.
they come to the mix and they create with you. They propose things with you. So that kind of dance between everyone that's contributing to the narrative process is just so beautiful that I just wish that it was more commonly part of the making of a soundtrack. So
Do you think it's a matter of education? Because I've noticed this too. Like when I did my master's in film composition, but a lot of the people in my program came from just being in their bedrooms and working with MIDI instruments. And
hmm
I came from like all live. Like I didn't even know what MIDI was when I got to that program. I was just used to compose like chamber music. And so
hmm
I had like this big existential crises around like MIDI. But then I kind of, and it took me a long time to catch up, but then I was like, I don't think I even like MIDI. Like I
hmm
get why to do it in many circumstances, but like to me it doesn't represent most instruments well for what I want to do with instruments.
hmm
And I think most importantly I miss that collaborative process. Like I love bringing musicians into my studio and being like, play this, what does this sound like? Okay, let's change it. Like what's the craziest thing your instrument can do? If I wanted this emotion, where in your instrument would you play? And there's a certain amount of that you have to know as an orchestrator to like understand ranges and stuff. But there's, like you said, there's no way you could ever learn on every instrument as much as that person who spent their whole life on that instrument knows. And why not
Yeah.
ask them? Everyone's like, Google. I'm like, they're bring them in your house and ask them to their face. Like,
Yeah. I mean, but it is all part of. I don't really know where this comes from, but what I think is happening now is that we are somehow contributing to a culture in which music has been overlooked for so long. And again, before, music was such a staple in the creative process, and now it seems almost as an afterthought, right? Like people come to you and say, okay, this is what I want people to feel with this scene. This is where the scene is going after the scene is already crafted, as opposed to saying, this is where the character needs to go. What is your take on it? And then you go through it. You leave the character, and then you develop a sense of motion that takes the character from point A to point B. But you need time for that. Like you need time to, because in somehow what's happening is that even though you're getting notes from a director, like from the film director or the play director, you are directing an important piece of narrative with elements that nobody else in the team necessarily understands, unless the producer or the director are also musicians. And even in those cases, right? Like you're just saying something beautiful about the power of bringing live musicians to co-create, even if you're the one coming up with the whole vision, right? So it's the nuance of collaboration, it's the nuance of
Yeah.
knowledge, it's the nuance of practice, it's the nuance of coming together to join resources and approaches. What I think is miss, on the equation, and now that's creating such a harsh scenario for musicians that I feel like we are somehow forced to almost compete against each other in order for us to be like the most available person. I can do it quicker, I can do it faster, I can do it
Yeah.
cheaper, I can, I can do it
Call it
like
a race to the bottom.
absolutely, yeah. And I already got like Hans Zimmer nailed down. Like I know exactly how to compose it like Hans. I know
Yeah.
exactly how to compose like John Williams. So it's not like we're not asking artistic questions. We're just trying to win the market. And I think some of that is important, not to the detriment of the artistic process. And that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, I feel like we should just like kind of redefine things at this point and be like,
Mm.
that's a decision that makes complete sense. If your whole thing is like, it's about money and efficiency, and in order to get these big graphics and everything, you have to have that, and that's why that makes sense. It's like, cool, that's what that is. That's not what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's draw a line in the sand or something and like start. Yeah, because I think there becomes, and it's so interesting. You must get, I feel like you can kind of tell when someone approaches you based on the question they're asking, whether they're looking for you or not, I remember
Mm-hmm.
getting one person saying like, I have this film, I want you to write the score, I think you're the right person. Basically, I just want like this one sound that just goes like from here to here, and it's just that.
Mm.
I'm like, I'm not your girl.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
I
no,
know
no.
I could do that for you and take your money, but I'm not going to do that. Like, I'll literally teach you how to use Logic before I will do that for you. It's like, I don't know.
It'll be definitely cheaper to teach
It would be
someone.
cheap. Yeah, I know. I'm like, I don't know, like assist. What's interesting? Like, so I was an opera singer before I went into composition, actually.
Oh
And
wow!
yeah,
In Miami?
I actually, after high school, I started musical theater, and then I went to opera in Chicago. I was,
Oh nice! Oh
but one
nice,
of
nice.
the things I love Maria Callas. She was like a big idol to me, and she had a very interesting philosophy on the artist to the audience relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
she always said like the job of the artist is not to ask the audience what they want and do that. It's to educate the audience, because you should know more than they know about the craft, and then you should be able to
Mm-hmm.
kind of curate and let them know what they don't know that they want.
Yeah.
And I guess it is slightly manipulative, not in a terrible way, but like, yeah, it's that thing of like, we've kind of set up a situation where we're responding to people asking questions that they haven't set up the time to have the true conversation of like, let me guide you to a better question. Like, based
Mm-hmm.
on what I know, I can guide you to something you don't even know you can have yet. Because like, if you're coming to me saying like, I want basically, I don't know, like the Lion King score or something. I'm like, okay, let me ask you some deeper questions and let you know what is possible, and then kind of, help you build, I guess, your imagination. Because I think, you know, as a composer, I made a post about this recently, but I think it's like creative problem solving ultimately.
Yeah.
And it's not, I think we actually, when I feel at my best, I'm in a very humble position in front of musicians where I'm like, I have the ability to think vertically because I've trained my brain to think in larger scores, but that kind of doesn't mean a whole lot without you. Like, I can think this way, but then I'll need your assistance to kind of fill in what makes more sense there. And it's not to say that I can just like put notes there, like throw a bunch of footballs down or something, but like I keep zooming out and then we keep zooming in together and then I'll keep zooming out. And I kind of feel like my job is to continually zoom out and then make a little bit more decision about like, that's great, but maybe not for this part. Let's hold that idea for. So it almost feels like a kaleidoscope. Have you ever played those?
Yeah.
Where you're like,
No.
shapes and then we move them. And then I'm like, yeah, about there, that's good. So it's more like a curation.
I love that. I absolutely love that approach. I also think vertically most of the time. So the way music happens to me, and I love saying music happens to me because it's not. Um, I have a couple of friends who do improv, and their approach to it is like I just get out of the way and let the process go. You know, like I stop being a barrier for it, and I relate to that so much in my own craft, in my own music making, because that's exactly how I somehow ideate any kind of musical proposal or narrative, right? They just come to my brain and I just try to like write it down initially by hand, and I just transcribe it, and then after like the skeleton or the structure is placed, I just start messing out and playing some stuff on the piano, or doing something on MIDI. My experience with MIDI was a little different than yours, because I was exposed to MIDI at a very early age on my own. So I grew up in Venezuela. That's my home country, and in Venezuela, you never have the kind of resources, financial resources, to truly have like a super like studio with all these resources and all of that. But you have access to one of the largest, if not the largest, symphonic movement or programs in the world. So Venezuela has a program called El Sistema, and El Sistema has like thousands, hundreds of thousands of children and youth and professional musicians. It's like a big pyramid.
Is that Dudamel?
Yeah, so Gustavo and I come from the same orchestra. I mean, Gustavo and I, and many more people. But most of us, most Venezuelan musicians went through the program. Not all of us, but most of us went through the program, and a lot of like heavy names have come from it as well. But the beauty of not only from the perspective of the ensemble, but also to audiences. So you start kind of realizing that like that balance between the artistry and the audience, and how people react to it, and how emotional people can get with specific composers. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer to go in the direction of music for storytelling, even though I was um, playing still in the orchestra. I was kind of venturing on my own into Reason. Reason was the first software I ever owned. Now, in retrospect, and I even think it was Reason 1, like the very first version. I got Reason, and I have a funny story with it because like many years later, I think in 2012, I sent them an email. Like I was listening to their orchestral demo song, and I was like, you know what? I think I've been using this software for so long, and it meant so much to me in Venezuela. Of course, now I'm just using Reason at this point for electronic music mostly, or hybrid stuff. But at the time, that was like my main platform. So I sent them an email, like a cold email, saying like, "Hey, just so you know, like I've been using your software for so long, and I love it, and I'm just venturing into MIDI. This is a little bit of what I do." And they allow me to compose the demo song for it. And they've been
That's
using the
awesome.
same. the same demo song for a long time. So I don't know. I kind of fell in love with the possibility of listening to something that I otherwise wouldn't ever be able to listen to. So for that specifically, I'm really grateful for all this new wave of new technology. That said, there's absolutely nothing that can replace a human being. And again, like in multiple layers, we already talked about the collaboration of it. But also, what I'll say is that every single narrative process lives in a context. So when you have a character that doesn't live anywhere or doesn't interact with anyone, then the character really doesn't mean anything, right? Like the character is the character because it relates to an environment. In the case of me as a composer,
That's such a great sentence, by the way.
I'm
Culture is the culture because it relates to the environment.
indeed.
That's
So
not obvious, I think, to people, especially now, where it's very tempting to be very insular and kind of like just talk to ourselves.
Yeah. No, I hear you. But the thing is that the way that applies to me is that I'm not a composer without the people I work with. You know,
Right.
I'm not an artist without the people I make art with or art for. You know, it's this beautiful balance. You know, I'm primarily I started orchestra conducting, right? And when you're conducting, there's something beautiful that happens in the moment of a concert. Of course, everything we do happens at the rehearsal. Right when you get to the concert, if the conductor is important, then you didn't do such a good job in the rehearsal. So the importance of the concert for me is that you are containing the energy from the orchestra and the audience at the same time, right? So you have like this 360 experience. So what you're actually doing is funneling, and it is such an emotional practice at that point because it's like after a period of very strict rehearsals, you finally have an opportunity to dance. You finally have an opportunity to blend and just like, allow yourself to be. I'm gonna stop it there. Allow yourself to fully be. So to that end, and to my previous point, even though MIDI has been like core to my ability to listen to what I'm trying to create, there's nothing that can compare to the energy of both the audience and the live musicians and that constant balance and feedback. And I absolutely love that. The other thing that I wanted to tell you, you mentioned earlier in the conversation, is that I'm currently working on a VR project
Yeah.
with this badass filmmaker called Carla Forte. She's a badass, and her husband Alexei Taran. He comes. They're kind of the best of all worlds because by the way, both of them also live in Miami. He comes from the theater and the ballet scene as a choreographer and dancer and theater director, and like he's just a genius. And she is also a dancer, a contemporary dancer, and an amazing filmmaker and writer. So I feel like this like combination of brains the two of them have is always creates like these explosive, beautiful things. But because they come from that world, the current process we're working on is a long process. It's a process that also values workshop, also values development, also values maturity of process. So yeah, so as soon as you're ready to kind of dive deep into VR, I'll be more than happy to I don't know, to connect with you and kind of explore things musically. I know you're
I'm
always
ready
looking for
now.
collaboration. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I'm so excited about it. It's more of like the resources aspect where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I have to be kind of close to, first of all, the actual equipment, and then people who have already been in this field for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not kind of like, was it like reinventing the wheel or anything?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when I'm about to dive into something new, I kind of like bring in all of the things that I'll need to like immediately go fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in. I'm super excited about VR. Yeah.
Let's do it. There's a lot of
Yeah.
beautiful things happening in that realm. And I think even though I feel like VR still in super early stages,
Yeah.
graphically, like as far as resolution and equipment and all of that, I absolutely think this is gonna just open up a whole realm of possibilities for us.
Totally.
Because the way we can compose in VR, I mean, there are many ways to approach the same thing, right? You can even go through stereo or anything like that if that's what you choose to do. But you also have an opportunity to compose in 360, and you also have an opportunity to allow the movement of the person experiencing the VR proposal to change the way in which music affects the scene based on the way they move in the space. Like it happens when you're playing a video game, right? Like when you're playing a video game, you have a full map of sounds happening uh, programmatically, and of course, like you as a player somehow become a co-composer in the sense that you walk out of or out of a scene and affect the length of the music you're listening to, the volume of the music, depending on how close or how far you are from a specific object or scene or situation. So this kind of balance is a creative challenge, and it is super exciting because it breaks the horizontal structure of music making
Yep.
and forces you to think in 360. Um,
And even beyond that, thinking about form differently too, which
mhm,
I think is connected to what you just said. But like, Varese is one of my favorite composers, and basically the inventor of electronic music. Like, thought it up kind of before the instruments were in place. But he was already thinking about form as imitating the natural world. He didn't think about
mm,
form as linear. He was like looking at how crystals formed and then creating like these like explosive structures that did not exist on this plane. It was not like you said A to B. And to me, like in undergrad, I was doing papers on his works and stuff, and I was like, this is so exciting. Like, why aren't
mm,
more people talking about this? We spend so much time in music composition talking about like sonata form and shit. And it's just like a little bit tired. Like, yeah, spend a week
yeah.
on it. We get it. Like, recapitulation, A, B, that's fine. But like, what's next? Like, that's my.
Hmm.
And I still like, I love making pop music that's very formulaic. And that's fine with
Hmm.
me too. Like, I'm not anti formula, but like when you're working with like symphonic music and like you said starting to get it in the VR and then starting to think about 360 spatial audio, then you're like, why are we still writing ABA form?
Hmm.
Like I know that our brains are kind of trained to like that, but I don't know. I've got questions.
No, 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 no. I hear you. I hear you. And you're also bringing such a beautiful point. So you're saying something now that is connected to something you also said at the beginning, right? About the question we all get about what kind of music do you make?
Right.
And one of the things I absolutely love about you is that you're always exploring. Like if you listen to, I don't know, 5 tracks in a row of stuff you make, all of them are gonna sound different, but all of them are gonna sound like you. And I think that is probably the most challenging thing to achieve. So I'm wondering, how do you define your own signature? Like how do you manage to work across mediums and formats and still preserve who you are and your voice in it?
First of all, what a compliment. Thank you.
I mean, it's true
This
though.
interview is great. Let's just keep this going. You keep complimenting me, and I'll keep just soaking it up. I have like kind of quippy, ridiculous answers to that question because sometimes people have asked me that before, and I'm like the queen of melancholy. Like that's always my answer. But I don't think that's the entire truth. I think that's just kind of me, like
Hmm.
like I don't know, escaping the answer maybe. Um, but I do think, the more that I talk to other artists and ask them about their process and stuff, the more I kind of realize what my process is because
Hmm.
I kind of assume, I think I generally lack objectivity as a person. I think I take everything very personally. Everything's very personal for me. And that's not something I'm proud of or anything, but it's just like kind of an observation I've started to have just by other people telling me about their work. And I'm like, oh, I just assumed that everyone felt like I feel, or I
Hmm.
assumed that everyone generally thinks about things how I think about things. And like, the more I talk to other people, the more I'm like, wow, Hope, that's like just not at all true at all. I'm really obsessed with like the world of emotions, which maybe that's too broad, but like there's something about being able to hold kind of like what seem like disparate thoughts, but kind of like the complexity of emotion that is many, many layered things at one time. That's really fascinating to me, and that I think is something of a signature. And I think on the surface layer, it can maybe seem like there's a lot of dark melancholy or something, but then on the layer right under that, like a lot of kinetic energy and like soothing, I don't know what the word would be, but kind of like this like folky, soothing, everything's gonna be okay layer too. So kind of like these, I think there's some kind of like an imprint of like a weird, complex emotional stamp that is on a lot of my music, where you listen to it and you're kind of like, I have a very specific feeling, but I don't know what the word is, type thing. And that's the thing that I've come to, but that's also kind of my personal obsession, and I feel like quest in my own life is like, well, it's not that simple. Like you can decide to never talk to someone again that was the love of your life and that you have all of these profound emotions for, but then you have all these other recognitions that, like, you know, it's just like things are very layered. There's a lot that, you know, and I was just having a conversation last week with someone who I've spent a lot of time working with, Marissa Almanik, as a choreographer. We've worked on many ballets together, and we've worked on a lot of projects kind of around death and grief. A lot of the conversations that we were having were kind of around, there's no clear narrative in Western culture, or kind of no stories that support what you do when someone dies, or how you hold that, or how you process that, or what that means even. It's just kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Like funeral, have a couple months to grieve, get over it, move on, there are pictures on your mantle. But kind of like not very helpful for I don't know, it just, I think it creates like a constant stream of anxiety of like, okay, so death is just like behind closed doors, wash your hands clean of it, get over it, move on, but we all know that we're gonna die. So like, what's the meaning of life, and what are we all doing here? You know, just like this constant hum of anxiety because you're not dealing with the complexities of what it, and everyone deals with death in their life. So it's like, I feel like things like that are fascinating to me, which is, I think, ultimately like a stamp of digging into the complexity, but ultimately around emotion. And I think because I grew up as a dancer before I was a musician, I'm very aware of the intelligence of the body. And I think that's something we cut off in Western culture, where we're like, everything is intellect, you know, everything is, if you can't think the problem away, then it doesn't exist. Or if you can't, like, you know, measure it with a stick, then it doesn't exist, or whatever that is. And I'm just like, that's just not true.
Hope, where can I apply for a friendship? This is genius. I'm gonna there you go. I'm gonna share with you something like very personal that I haven't actually considered, and that is just coming up to my mind as you're sharing about your own approach to this. But I've dealt with depression on and off throughout different periods of my life, even though I am a super positive person, which is not unique. Like a lot of people who go through the depression periods also happen to be super positive, and I'm one of those. So when I'm composing, I have a tendency to let go of stuff that I'm not able to just articulate verbally. Therefore, like when you listen to my music, you're also going to see that there's always an undertone of intimacy, vulnerability, that is coming from a place that is been always part of me, that I don't usually face publicly, and I'm kind of tired of that. and I'm kind of ready to embrace that more thoroughly, because then what happens, and I don't know why I'm opening up so much, but I love this conversation, so I'm gonna go for it anyway. Um, so what happens is that usually when I compose something, because it's coming from that place, I always experience a sense of embarrassment when I'm about to.
Yeah.
So what happens with that is that I first need to let it out, and then when people start commenting positively or negatively about it, then that part of me also gets, I don't know, validated, or like the existence of it, not the quality, but the existence of it gets recognition, and that really helps me process it. So when you're talking about body versus intellect, I relate to it so much, because I cannot tell you, even though I told you that I think of music pieces as a whole, is never coming from an intellectual place. Like the brain is a part that I try to get out of the way, right? Because it is the whole self. It's like you're constantly translating the world around you into music. That's pretty much what we do, right? We're translating languages constantly. Um, so I do relate to what you just said so much, and in
And
so many levels.
yeah. Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah, and in yogic, like I spend a lot of time studying yoga in my life and stuff too, and they talk about the energetic bodies. So even
Mm,
beyond your physical body, you have many energetic bodies outside of that. And they say that change only actually reaches the physical body once it's gone through like your 9 energetic bodies that exist
mm,
that create your aura outside of it. But like, I mean, it's so complex. Like we kind of think like the brain is this complex organism, and then you have your body that's just like carnal. And like,
mm,
there's an aspect of your body that is carnal and that is earthly and that is like how you are going to experience contrast in this world and like create these things, and that's true, but that's not like the end of it. And I
mm,
like what you said about um, you know being in the arts a long time. Almost everybody I know has some kind of like bipolar disorder, or like we have names for it that to me don't quite hit it. Like they don't quite, I mean, we're trying to like dance around with language to figure out what exactly that is. But I read this book when I was younger that is one of my absolute favorites, called The Mists of Avalon.
mm,
And in the book, this lady who's like kind of like a high priestess figure, and like Avalon is between France and England, this kind of special place where a lot of the high kings and stuff of that era, like King Arthur, were trained and learned from monks and shit.
mm,
And she said something about like, people don't talk about your capacity grows like this. Like your
mm,
capacity for joy only grows because your capacity for like sadness and despair is like, so it's not like you just like, you're kind of leveled and then you experience happiness. It's like it extends in both directions. And so
mm,
I think it's, yeah, there's this weird narrative around like, oh, but you seem so happy, you seem so joyful or something. It's like, that means that you've met somebody who has a greater capacity for feeling in
mm,
general. It does not
mm,
exist. It does not like spike in one direction or the other. And you can definitely like go through them as one person, but it just means that your sphere has expanded to experience more and to feel more. And I have observed, just like being on TikTok recently and teaching more like younger people, that I think more and more um, people are being born who are more sensitive to all of these
mm,
things. And like, it's going to be really interesting to see how even younger generations start to redefine things and to kind of bring things, because even just swiping through TikTok and observing how Gen Z talks about what we think are very taboo subjects, like there are a lot of people um, who are autistic on TikTok talking about their experience being autistic and kind of bringing it
mm,
in this way that's not shameful at all, but they're like, hey, here's like a day in the life of me as an autistic person and kind of things that happened for me. And then a lot of people, just by them kind of sharing and other people seeing them back and supporting them back, it like does this cool alchemy
oh, but yeah.
where like, yeah, like you talked about, it's like somehow just because someone can observe, first of all, one has to show up to be like, okay, well,
Mm,
here's what's really happening, which takes a lot of guts. And then other people can show up to kind of mirror you back and be like, hey, I see you. And then magic. And then it's just like pure magic happens.
It's beautiful because you're talking to right to the 2 points I made before, about not being the same person 2 days in a row. And this is the type of access, the type of environment that shapes your understanding of the world you live in. And I'm also curious to see like how these new generations are going to approach creative processes. I think for the generation of our parents, maybe, because I feel like we are in a transition, but I think like for the generation of our parents, emotions were supposed to be repressed, right? Because you needed to focus on, I mean, and parents, grandparents, Great Depression, like they went through so much that I think they just created this culture of productivity at all costs.
Right.
Even
right.
Yeah, even if the price was the human experience, like you're repressing so many things in order for you to.
Even if the price was a human experience. Wow.
Yeah, because like you're preventing yourself from going through yourself in order for you to truly take in the world around you. So somehow in the middle of the process, we started talking about emotions as a negative thing, as opposed to being just a crucial part of what makes us human. And I think creative processes on our generation also suffer from that. I believe we are the ones somehow re-breaking the barrier somehow, because I think this economy, and by economy I mean like the point we were talking about earlier about having to come up with music in 2 weeks. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be hybrid. It needs to be cheap. And it needs to be shiny, right? And it needs to sound like someone else. Like those are kind of the parameters of the industry these days. And that is coming out of it. That is coming out of not really having the time or the intention to truly go through a human process on it.
Intention is such a good word too. I feel like I hear that word coming up all over the place now, where people they're missing that. And like, actually, this reminds me, I want you to finish your thought, but it reminds me so much of, I was listening to this interview with Cornel West, and someone had asked him, like, what do you think, they asked him specifically, what do white people need to know in the West right now? And he said, I really think that, like, you just need better role models, because the role models right now are all glitz and glamour. And he's like, you miss out on greatness when that's your hero. When glitz and glamour is your hero, you miss out on greatness. And he's like, greatness is, I think the questions were like, what is your capacity to love? What is your intention for something more about like the discipleship kind of to the human race, to, like you're saying, like the human experience, that what if that was greatness? And what if glitz and glamour wasn't greatness? But we don't have many role models of that, and maybe it's like an extension of this survival thing left over from our parents' generation of like, just put your head down and make as much product as humanly possible and sell as much as you can. Keep the money under your mattress because you never know when you're going to starve or whatever, which like is fair. It's unfair, I think, to villainize, because understanding what came from, but I think you're right. It's like you miss out on the human part.
Yeah, I mean, and isn't it the one thing we all have in common? That we're all human and we all go through the same thing and we all live in a shared ecosystem. So I feel creative processes coming from there can absolutely gain a lot. Again, if we get out of the way, like if we allow the artistic process to go through us, and trust that we have everything we have, truly, to navigate that, to contribute to the storytelling process in a meaningful way. I mean, again, and I have to jump, and we definitely need to schedule a round 2, because A,
definitely.
You're freaking amazing, and B, I have so many more questions and so many more topics that I feel like I would love to talk to you about.
We're gonna do part 2.
So let's absolutely put a date on it. But just to close out, Um, A, I absolutely love your approach to this, and I absolutely love that that you also come from long processes first and physical processes first, and then um, try to translate that into digital or shrinked processes or fast tracked engagements, I guess, for film or anything like that. Because I think like the more composers talk about these things openly and the challenges of the post production model, the more we can absolutely do something about it. I absolutely think we need some space to be human in the artistic process. I absolutely think we need some space for us to collaborate, to stumble upon serendipity, to allow ourselves the space and the time for it. Um, and enjoy it and truly enjoy it. Like what comes out of you is intimate, otherwise it's not art, right? Like what comes out of you is humane, otherwise it's not art. Um, and and yeah, like I have so many thoughts right now. Hope,
So good. So good.
hope. I I absolutely loved it, and absolutely let's have a second round. Um,
It is
we,
written. It will happen.
this is great, and I hope we're gonna have an opportunity to meet in person. And I know you're not a big fan of LA, but I promise.
Oh no, I am. I actually
Oh,
love
you are?
LA.
Okay. Oh, okay, okay, okay.
I don't
All
quite
right.
fit in a lot of places, but that doesn't mean I don't love being there.
Well, no, no,
Maybe
no.
I just
Next,
haven't found my people yet.
that's
I
what
kind of
that's what
feel
I was
like
that's what I was about to that's what I was about to say. The next time you're in LA, hit me up. I want to show you my LA
oh,
and and
I would
and see,
love
and,
that.
and see
Actually, I
how
will be
how
there
you
in
go through it.
July, so
All
this
right.
July
All right.
I'll be there.
All right. Let's do something. So let's schedule a second round, and let's also have a live when you're here in LA in different places. I want to see your reaction to it.
Yes, I love
All
it. Thank
right.
you so much,
Hope.
Abby, and we'll have a part two.
Thank you for the invitation. I loved it. Again, I'm a big fan of your music. I love what you do. I love the way you create. I love the way you think. So looking forward to the second round.
Me too. Thank you so much, Abby. Have a
All
good day.
right. You too.
Bye, everybody.